Lessons in Chemistry is the limited series that we have all been waiting for. Finally, a book turned show that just wraps up with a nice little bow on it. No season 2, thank God. Anyway, let's get into it. So, Lessons in Chemistry was a fantastic, phenomenal read. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Last week, we talked about Black Cake, which I gave a 4.8. I think I'm giving Lessons in Chemistry 5 stars, which I think is the second time I'm doing that for a fictional book this year. And it's well deserved. It's so good. It was so good. So a little bit about the book. Lessons in Chemistry tells us the story of Elizabeth Zott, who becomes a beloved cooking show host in the 1960s Southern California after being fired from her job as a chemist. So I thought, going into this book, I thought this was going to be like a Julia Childs-esque, like, what's that one book? Julie and Julia. I thought it would be more about the cooking. It's absolutely more about the chemistry, which is perfectly fine. She really tries very hard to bring chemistry into her cooking show and really becomes like a motivation for a lot of women in this time, which I think is a beautiful thing. So I loved it. Like I said, a little bit about the author. Lessons in Chemistry was written by Bonnie Garmus. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's an American author who was raised in Seattle. And at the end of the audiobook, I went back and forth between the audiobook and the physical book, or the ebook actually. And at the end of the audiobook, there is an interview with the author, and she talks about the research that she did for this book. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was that she went back and found chemistry textbooks from this time period, so from the 60s, so that when talking about elements, I know chemistry, when talking about chemistry and these things, it could be true to what was known then, because the research that was done then is not the research that is done now. The information we have about chemistry now far exceeds, of course, what we knew back then, but she wanted to stay as true to the time as possible, which I think is really important. She is not a scientist, but her dad, the author, her dad was a scientist, so I'm sure that maybe motivated this book a little bit. And yeah, I loved it. Loved every part of it. How many times can I say that? So yeah, my thoughts on the book. Again, it was perfection. I do need to talk to you about my favorite part of the book, and it is 630. 630 is a dog, and one of the most important characters in this book, if we're being honest. And I was very curious how they were going to translate 630 into the show. I was like, is he going to be his own person? Is he going to have his own mind? Or is this going to be like other books that include, or shows that include dogs, humans making assumptions about what the dogs are thinking? And they did a phenomenal job staying true to the book and making 630 his own character. In the book, Elizabeth is trying to teach 630 as many words as possible, and I think they say he gets up to like 300 and something words, which is outrageous. He's like helping doing the chemistry, he's in the lab helping. It's so ridiculous, but lovely. So amazing. My one bone to pick with the book is that, understandably so she gets fired from her job and decides to turn her kitchen into a laboratory. But it's still making very intricate meals. And I'm like, you're cooking this food with your lab equipment right next to it? You got chemicals right there, and you're also cooking food that you're serving to your child. They didn't go into it, but I think that would have deserved a CPS report. Just make it make sense. Like, why would you do that? I knew the book was going to be heartbreaking from the moment I started reading it. I don't think it qualifies as a romance, but as life, there is romance. You know what I mean? My life isn't a romance, but I have romance. That's how this book works. But it starts off with Elizabeth as a single mother and then goes into her love story with Calvin. And so I knew my heart was going to be broken. I knew at some point I was going to be the saddest person alive. And that came very abruptly. In the book, it was a little abrupt. I expected it. And so 100 pages in, I think Calvin dies. In the show, obviously, I knew it was going to happen. I don't think the average viewer knew it was going to happen. And the way that they killed that man was terrible. Why would you guys do that? In the book, spoilers, Calvin is for a run with 6:30. It's really interesting because in the 60s, running as an exercise was an up-and-coming thing. And so people were like, why are you running outside? Go run in place in your house like a normal person. Anyway, he's out with 6:30 on a run and gets caught up with the leash. They hear a sound and they think it's a gun. And they're doing a little tug of war. 6:30's like, no, we need to go that way. Calvin's like, no, we need to go that way. And Calvin ends up slipping on, I think, like an oil slick. You know, when the cars drip oil and he slips on it and busts his head open. And he's bleeding out onto the floor behind a parked car. And then the parked car doesn't see him and runs him over. I'm sorry, it's making me emotional just thinking about it. And guess what kind of car it was? It was the police. A police car. He's in the parking lot of the police department and he gets run over. So that's how Calvin died. And it was very sad. 6:30, it wasn't your fault. Okay, in the show, Calvin is out for a run with 6:30, and again, the leash gets in the way, and 6:30 is like, no, we gotta be careful, and he's pulling and pulling and pulling, and then the collar comes off of 6:30's neck, and Calvin falls into the path, as my camera is about to, falls into the path of a bus, which the show shows us that he runs past this bus and almost gets hit by it every single day. So truly, it was bound to happen. But it didn't have to go down like that. I didn't like it, but I didn't write it, so it is what it is. It just is it's such a quick moment. It's like the last scene of one of the episodes, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart that it played out that way. So I don't give the show 5 stars is what I'm trying to say. These are some things that the show sticks pretty true to the book. Except for the swim lessons, but whatever. They don't show her rowing as much. It is only 8 episodes, so they gotta condense it. But it stays pretty true to the source material. But there were some changes that I noticed that I wanted to talk about. I think one of the biggest things is everyone's temperament is a little bit better in the show. I think in the book, no one likes Calvin, which is kind of true. In the book, everyone gives him a hard time. He gives everyone a hard time, I should say. But he thinks everyone is dumb, which all smart people do. Another change. In the book, they let us know that Calvin is hideous. They use every opportunity to let us know that Elizabeth is far more attractive than Calvin. And Calvin is only with her for her looks. And I personally think the actor that plays Calvin is too attractive. But whatever. But everyone's temperament is a little bit nicer. I think Elizabeth is a little more likable. Her boss is more likable. There's sexual assault twice in the book. And it's only once in the show. Not that it needed to be there. But her new boss at the TV station is not as unlikable a character as he is in the book. Frask, the assistant at Elizabeth's first job, is also more likable, and then they end up working together at the TV station, which never would have happened in the book. Frask was a terrible person. So yeah, everyone's temperament is a little bit better in the book. I do think this reflects on Elizabeth or you see that in Elizabeth in the way that she shows emotion. In the book, you could say anything to that woman and she would not flinch. She wouldn't blink. Her boss called her stupid, didn't mean a thing. And it made him mad because she didn't react to it. In the show, she is a much more emotional person. And when she isn't awarded the research fund that she deserves, rightfully so, she gets really emotional at the table in front of all these men. And I was like, the Elizabeth I know would have never done that. So that's something that I didn't like about the show. Elizabeth Zott is also more invested in her television program in the show than she would have been or was in the book. She was doing research before she started filming, took notes, didn't use them. She was doing research about these people smiling, didn't smile one bit. And my issue with that is Brie, the actor that plays Elizabeth Zott, is it Brie Larson? I don't know. But you can tell she's trying so hard not to smile. And to Elizabeth Zott, it comes easy. Not smiling comes very easy to her. So it was weird watching that. Like, why would she have been doing research and not apply any notes? Who does that? She also really enjoys fame. People are like asking for her autograph, and she's letting them interrupt conversation with her daughter to give them her autograph. And I was just like, again, will the real Elizabeth Zott please stand up? Because she would never. She did not like fame in the book and didn't want her daughter anywhere near it. In the end, I don't want to give too many spoilers because I think the book is absolutely worth reading. The show is absolutely worth watching. But in that order, go read the book and then watch the show if you haven't done either already. Which is better though? That is the question, isn't it? The book. The wigs in the show kill me. Brie's wig, the hairline, like, y'all got budget. Make it look real. And so for that reason, I'm going to say the book is better. But yeah, there's so much that I'm not talking about because it's so detailed. Like, there's so many things happening in this book and in this show that I think is worth reading. Reverend Weekly is also fantastic. There is one thing that I forgot to talk about. The book talks a little bit about civil rights issues that are happening at that time, but it doesn't talk about anyone really participating in the movement. Like, there's 2 statements made, but they don't really do anything about it. It's just like, let's talk about race a little bit because it's the world we're living in, but we're not going to step into it. And I appreciate that the show did a better job in that. They have a black character in the show, which was not in the book. They made one of the characters black, and she's heavily involved in trying to keep her black community safe and protected and whole. And even though that doesn't happen, sadly, it's still an important thing to show. And the main character does get more involved in that, which I appreciated seeing. So yeah, there's a little more mystery to the book, something worth finding out that I'll let you guys find out on your own. Maybe this will be a spoiler-free video. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you for watching. Next week, we will talk about Leave the World Behind, the new Mahershala Ali, Julia Roberts movie. By now, it's probably not that new. It's probably a month out, but I'm halfway through the book, so I'm excited to discuss it with you all. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you then.